Don't stop, go get it,
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of James's Corner. I'm your host, James Richardson, and today I have a very special and exciting guest. I have Nick Brizzi on. He's a good friend of mine. We've been friends for a while. We both have cystic fibrosis, and we've related over the years in the community. Nick, it's a pleasure to have you on. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, James. It really is my pleasure to be here, buddy.
Awesome, man. It's good to see you, and I really
Same.
appreciate your time. So just introduce, yourself to the audience and give us a little bit of background of who you are and where you're from and kind of the things that just a little bit of what you've been through.
Absolutely. So my name is Nick Brizzi Jr. I'm born and raised in Chicago. As you said, I was born with a disease called cystic fibrosis in the 80s. I was born in 1981, which was a very difficult time to be born with CF because as you probably have spoken about this in the past, life expectancy was early teens at that time, and my parents were told, he's probably not going to live past 12, 13 years old. So give him the best life you can give him. And I guess pray that something happens, And in that process, I kind of grew up like a normal, regular teenage kid and regular kid, except the only difference was I come from a big Italian family. We have a lot of culture and tradition in our family, which I'm very proud of. I have two older brothers who I believe had a big part of saving my life, and especially one particularly, because they gave me a competitive spirit. We were always competing in sport. I was very involved in sports all my life, boxing, martial arts, soccer, basketball, tennis. We were in sport all our lives. And my father had a no victim mentality. He tried to instill that in me, and he didn't want me to do anything different than what my brothers were doing. And many times it was obviously a difficult process for me, but because of my cystic fibrosis. And if people don't know what cystic fibrosis is, a genetic condition in which the body is constantly creating mucus throughout all of its organs. That's an easy way to sum it up. There's a lot more to it and why it's happening, but so for those that don't understand. So if you could imagine ever having pneumonia, that's kind of what we live with all our lives, especially in the 80s. And I lived a life of being on nebulizer treatments 3-4 times a day for an hour each day, getting the vest therapy, or at the time there wasn't even vest growing up. So my mom and grandma would literally beat on my back, and they would do that for 30 minutes at a time, just pounding on my back until I would be able to spit mucus. So I grew up, I can't say normal because of those things, but aside from that, people that saw me in school and stuff, they didn't even really know I was like completely unhealthy until later on in my years, when I was like in high school, because I was starting to cough more, and it was always a struggle to breathe. But so that mentality of like, okay, I may not live that long, kind of made me pursue my dreams a little faster than maybe the average person would do, take more risks. So when I was 20 years old in 2002 or 2001, 2002, going into 2002, I ended up moving to Los Angeles and pursuing my dream of being an actor. So I lived in Los Angeles for about 22 years, just moved back to Chicago about April of this past year. And I pursued my dream of being an actor. I got my real estate license. I was a realtor in Los Angeles for over 20 years as well, and stayed active. And, a lot of things happened in that time period. I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for that introduction. And there's a lot of stuff I want to dive into because I know that you have a very interesting story. We've obviously talked off camera multiple times. But just explain a little bit about the shirt you're wearing, Nick, and what inspired you to, I know you have your own foundation and we'll speak on that a little bit, but what was the reason you started this foundation? And give us just a little bit of a background of like what pushed you to do all that.
Absolutely. So as I said previously, sports, exercise was a critical part of my life. It was what prolonged my life, and what saved my life, in my opinion, aside from support, faith, and love from family. Right. But that was important to me, and I know that it works. When I was at Children's Memorial Hospital in Chicago, I had a doctor named Dr. Stephen Boas. And aside from my parents involving me in sports, he was one of those doctors that was like newer thinking, like, okay, medicine is important, but so is exercise. And he did a lot of exercise studies about exercise and how it could help people with cystic fibrosis. So I'm very happy that I was lucky to have a doctor like that also focused on exercise. It was a big deal for him to teach us that as patients. So that was one thing. Then when I moved to California, I caught a pneumonia within like a year of being there. And at that time, it was 2003. I'll never forget it. One of the nurse practitioners told me, listen, if with a below 25% lung function, because at that time I got down below 25% because of that pneumonia, you have only a couple years to live if you don't get a transplant. So you got to get on a transplant list. Obviously, that scared the crap out of me. And my brother was with me. I'll never forget it. We were like, holy shit, dude, I have like 2 years to live. You know what I mean? Like, that was like hard to hear. It was like the first time someone directly told me you're going to die in 2 years if you don't get listed. So what I did was started the process of getting my listed for transplant, which is a lot of testing, et cetera. I was at USC at the time. But all of a sudden, I started exercising a little more. I got out of the hospital. I recovered a little bit. My lung function never exceeded over 25% from that point on. So at a 25% lung function, a lot of people are on oxygen at that point. For some reason, I wasn't. I was like, I could do more than the average 25% lung function CFer can do. And that was probably because I exercised all my life, you know, or was involved in fitness. So then I started getting back in the gym. I was boxing with my friend Don Wilson, who was a kickboxer, well-known kickboxer. My friend Chris, you know, he's an actor. We built like a little gym at his mom's house in Malibu. And before you know it, that whole summer we were boxing. And that was the summer I was supposed to be listed for a transplant. But I'm hitting a speed bag for 10 rounds, you know. So I'm like, okay, this is different. So then I stopped all the testing for the transplant. I said, you know, I'm just going to keep focusing on my exercise, focusing on my life. I wasn't mentally ready to be listed. And I think I made the right choice because for 14 years, I lived with a below 25% lung function and, you know, without having to get a transplant. Of course, CF, as you know, it is a disease that's a beast. So eventually it got to me and my lung function dropped to like 11%.
Wow.
And I'm getting why this whole story is kind of important to the Breathe Like a Boss Foundation.
Yeah.
So at 11%, I did have to get listed. So this is 2015. I got listed for a transplant at Stanford, which is one of the best hospitals you can get listed at in Palo Alto. And at that point, I got the call within 2 months. On October 17th, 2015, I received the call for my double lung transplant and received that double lung transplant that saved my life. At that point, I was on oxygen 24/7. I mean, I had weeks to live. I mean, literally, it was a really bad situation. I didn't even have the energy to eat, to shower, to wipe myself going to the bathroom. I mean, it was really, really bad, you know? And so by the grace of God, not only the God, but faith, but also the amount of support I had because of like all the fundraisers that were going on. I was living in Stanford area for 9 months, especially after recovery. I had bills in LA from the house we had. And not to mention, at the time I was married, she wasn't working because she was a hairstylist and she had a shoulder injury. So none of us were working and we had all these bills. So we had no choice but to fundraise. And we had like fundraisers in LA. We had fundraisers in Chicago. We had fundraisers in Italy. I mean, my whole town in Italy, community came together, started a soccer tournament in my name.
Wow.
And it was an incredible amount of support and love that was all around me. And when you see that, it gives you hope. You know what I mean? And as a man of faith, that gives you hope. So I knew I could, if I can just get to that transplant, I would make it through because I'm strong enough mentally. And exercise then became another key component post-transplant. So with all that help, with all that love, with an organ donor that came at the right time, you receive a gift of life like that. What do you do with it? Now it's your choice. You could either just be grateful for it and live your life, or you live a life of giving back. For me, because of all the nonprofits also that helped me, those people inspired me, all the support I got inspired me, the exercise that helped. That's why I started the Breathe Like a Boss Foundation. I wanted to give that gift to many people that don't have that kind of support, people that don't understand or can't afford exercise, can't afford to go to a gym, can't afford to to just even get like a weight set at home. Most people with CFers that have transplant, they're on that disability, you know, and they have, especially if they're living in LA, it's very tight, you know, everything's tough.
Oh yeah.
And so the Breathe Like a Boss Foundation was formed in 2017. We're a 501c3 nonprofit that offers exercise equipment and exercise related grants for organ transplant recipients of any kind, as well as people with cystic fibrosis pre or post transplant.
Wow. Okay. That's incredible. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it. And like your story always inspires me. I know we both have CF, but your story inspires me because, you know, there's different gradations to these stories of cystic fibrosis. I think, you know, some people have been through harder and some people, I mean, they're all difficult on their own level, and we all have to be, you know, have to have faith and things like that. There's a couple things you said I want to touch on. Now, I've analyzed this about my life, Nick, and I'm sure that you have too. Why do you think that you were born with cystic fibrosis?
You know, this sounds really weird, and people probably laugh when I say this. I was actually talking to my niece today. I said, you know what? I'm actually grateful. I'm very grateful that I have CF. I feel like it's a gift. Now, I didn't believe that for many, many years.
Yeah, of course.
Now, where I'm at in life, what I'm able to do to help others, I felt like I was meant to have CF. I was meant to go through that. And if you're a man of faith, you believe that everything in life happens for a reason. You and I were having this conversation. Everything, and especially the bad stuff.
Yes.
The bad stuff is what, like, at the time, you don't understand why you're going through that. But then when you look back, when you reach that light at the end of the tunnel, and you're looking back at like all the dark times, you're like, oh, see, God did that on purpose. That was a test of faith. I had to go through that to gain empathy or to humble myself to be who I am. It's what created me. It's what built my character, you know? Yeah. And if I didn't go through that shit, you know what I say, and all that stuff, the difficult times, I wouldn't appreciate the good times as well, you know? And I feel, you know, God puts a Goliath in your life sometimes so you can find a David within you. It's one of my favorite quotes.
Absolutely.
And I believe that everything happens for a reason. I think it was a gift from God to be born with CF. People are going to laugh at me, but I always say that, and I truly, genuinely mean that.
Yeah, and I'm on the same page with you there. I've had a difficult battle with that. You know, like, why do I have this illness and nobody else has it? Why am I dealing with this and things like that? And you know, they say that God gives the hardest battles to his strongest warriors. You know, so I think that that's the most important thing. And you know, you speak on your faith a lot. And for me, in my experience, when I was in the darkest times with CF, even when it's not about CF, it gives you the capability and the tools to be able to dig yourself out of the hole, so to speak. But speak a little bit about that, Nick. Like, you know, there's people that go through things, right? And they just think that maybe God is attacking them or God is punishing them. Speak about how you tried to change did change your mentality of maybe not being a victim, but saying, okay, God's putting me through this to strengthen me rather than hurt me and put me in pain. Is there a specific time where, I'm sure that maybe when you were in those times where you were dying and on your deathbed, where you were experiencing maybe the presence of God or you felt something? Can you just speak a little bit about on that?
Without a doubt. I mean, first of all, in terms of feeling like a victim, with my parents and my father in particular, there was no choice for me. I couldn't be a victim.
Same.
It wasn't even a word in our vocabulary, you know. Yeah. And I'm grateful. So grateful that I was raised that way, because I was raised to do the similar things that my other healthy people were able to do.
Right.
And it wasn't like take a break. No, I had to push myself, and I'm grateful for that. So that was one. Second, as for my faith, I always had faith. My mother, you know, my parents are from Italy. My mother is a woman of strong faith. I mean, if we go on vacation anywhere, the first place we got to go is the church to see the church and pray, you know. And I grew up with prayer all my life. I believe in the power of prayer. And I believe that gives you hope. Faith is believing in something that you can't see that exists, you know, and so is hope. You know, like when you have hope, you believe that you're going to figure it out somehow, some way, even though you don't see that light at the end of the tunnel.
It's connected.
Faith and hope are connected, you know. I don't know if you know, there was it was like a biologist named Richter. His name was Carl Richter. In 1957, it's an interesting story. He took 15 rats and he put them in a like water. He wanted to see how long they would last swimming in this water. They lasted 15 minutes before they drowned. Then he took the similar rats, another 15 or whatever amount it was, put them in water. Right before that 15 minutes, he pulled them out, or somebody pulled them out, saved them, dried them up, fed them, put the same rats back in the water. The first batch died in 15 minutes. The second batch that got saved before the 15 minutes swam for over 60 hours. Think about that.
That's
what was the difference? The only difference was hope.
Yes.
because that batch knew that if they could just swim a little bit longer,
Someone would
they had
save them.
faith. That hope developed faith that somebody would save them. You know
Wow.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's a true story. You can look it up. It's an
No,
incredible.
I believe you. Yeah, I believe
That's the power of hope, and hope and faith are correlated.
you.
So for me, prayer is what I believe had a big component in at least motivating me, because I mean, it gives you an anticipation of like a better future when you have hope.
Yeah.
So even seeing, not besides faith and prayer and the power of prayer, seeing other CFers go through what I went through, they also gave me hope. I
Sure.
had like people that I look up to that I watched through that process, and I saw them get better. And that's also the strength of community, like just being there for other CFers and the
Yes.
support you give. And even if you're not a man of faith, you can still gain hope by watching others and being inspired by other people. This is why I think it's important to have these conversations.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I agree that hope and faith are, one and the same in a way. When you were in these times, Nick, that you've shared some stuff with me when, you were going into transplant and they had to, you know, break your chest open and break your ribs and all this crazy stuff that they have to do when they give you a transplant. What were some of the practices that maybe when you were by yourself in the bed and, obviously you're going to pray and things like that, but what are some of the practices? Because sometimes, I have to trick myself into, sometimes we have to trick ourselves and get ourselves into a place where we can ease our minds just by tricking ourselves in a way, you know what I mean? Telling ourselves that we're going to be okay and things like that.
Absolutely.
What were some of the practices that you did? Like, how do you get, for people that are watching this and that maybe are going through something difficult or maybe have been through something difficult and they don't understand, they don't know how to get out of that. What were some of the practices that you implemented into that situation of your life?
Yeah, so good question. So basically, growing up, I was involved with Taekwondo for a good period of my life. And in that Taekwondo, we did a lot of meditation, in those classes. And meditation was huge for me. It was, meditation at the end of the day, it's also focusing on your breathing. So when I went through my transplant, post double lung, I was in the hospital for about 23 days. The first 7 days, I was medicated so heavily that I was like basically in a delusional state. I don't remember a single thing in 7 days. I did some crazy stuff. I apparently attacked a nurse, a male nurse that I thought was attacking my wife at the time. I mean, there was so many delusions and crazy stuff going on. And it only stopped when at the time, my wife said, please take him off of all of the pain medication. He never did a drug in his life. He's never been drunk. He just can't handle it. It's too much for him.
Yes.
As soon as they started taking that stuff off and my mind came back, all of a sudden now I could do what I wanted to do. I could exercise. I could walk more. I could push myself. The mental strength is a huge thing.
Sure.
Now, at that point on, I only took one more oxy pill for the rest of the post-transplant life of mine. I never wanted to take a pain pill. I'm not suggesting other people do this.
Sure.
I'm not suggesting that it's a good idea. Maybe it wasn't a good idea. People yell at me all the time because I was in so much pain. But what I dealt with, what I had to do to deal with the pain, especially outside the hospital, was meditation. Meditation was huge for me. Just kind of focusing on my breathing, being in a quiet place. And I would use the BiPAP machine a lot, even after my transplant. It's kind of weird. Like when you're on oxygen for such a long period of time, you depend on it. Even though you don't need it, mentally, you're like, I need it. You know what I mean? So because I didn't have that nasal cannula that gave me like a sense of comfort at this point, weirdly enough, I didn't need it because my oxygen was 100. Sometimes I would put the BiPAP on and breathe with that, just take deep breaths. And that really did help me through my pain. I had to sleep upright for many months. As you said, my sternum was sawed in half. In the process, they spread my ribs apart. One of my ribs broke. So I was dealing with that, I mean, the pain was horrendous. Taking my first few steps was one of the hardest things possible. But I always surrounded myself, pre and post, but especially post, with positive people, positive things. Like if I'm on social media, all the pages my algorithms are all really positive things and faith-oriented things. So when you're like surround yourself, inundate your brain with all those things, and you're talking to people that have been through it, and these people are like there for you and kind of guiding you and telling you that you're okay, you're going to be okay. It's always 3 steps back and 1 step forward.
Yeah.
It's normal. These are good things. This is all stuff you need. You need support. You need love. You need to surround yourself with positive energy, positive stuff, meditation. That's all the stuff that I use to deal with all my pain, pretty much.
I see. And when you were meditating, like, and you were sitting there with your eyes closed, focus on your breathing, what were you thinking about exactly?
A lot of times prayer, just kind of praying and thanking God and just being grateful and just being quiet and just focusing on my breathing, you
And
know.
maybe sitting with God.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're
Absolutely.
sitting with
Prayer was a big part of my life, especially
God.
especially at that point in my life. You know, sometimes you get busy with things and I feel like, oh my God, I'm not praying enough, you know,
Yeah.
that those cross now that you're healthy. You know, many times you start praying when you need God more.
That's what most people do. They think
Yeah,
God is
you should. So
transactional.
it's true. So now my prayers are more of like, thank you, God, than
Yeah.
please God. You know,
Gratitude. Yeah.
yeah,
Gratitude, being in
yeah,
gratitude rather than asking for things all the time. I think that's an
absolutely.
interesting point. Like a lot of people think that that's the relationship with God, right? We have to just keep asking him for things, but then
Yeah,
never thank him for the things that we actually have. But the simple things too, you know,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
something that I think is so
I mean,
important.
absolutely. Your attitude determines your direction, and that's a big part in dealing with anything in
Yeah,
life, especially
absolutely.
a transplant. Like you got to have a good attitude, and you got
Yeah.
to see the good in everything. In
Yeah,
a sense,
absolutely.
and
Was there?
it's not easy. I listen. It's not easy. There was many
Yeah.
times where I
Yeah.
felt isolated by God. I felt
Mm.
isolated by the world. I felt like I was just like everything's happening to me.
Yeah,
I
you
did.
felt you're being punished, maybe.
I felt like I was being punished, and I didn't understand why.
Yeah.
Many times I would just scream, and I would just feel pain, and it wasn't easy, you know.
And
And
do you understand now, or have you
yeah, oh,
reflected on that?
without a shadow of a doubt. Now I understand clear as day. You know, I've never been more clear in my goal and in my mission, and
Mm.
I do believe that has a lot to do with the Breathe Like a Boss Foundation,
Yeah.
and also just sharing my story with others. You know, we just had the Transplant Games of America. I love the Transplant Games of America, and if anyone who watches this has had an organ transplant, I strongly encourage you guys to even just attend, even if you don't want to compete, attend it, just show up, you know, because the stories, the people you meet, how inspiring these people are, the donor families that you see there that have lost these loved ones who've given up, have sacrificed so much,
Mm.
and in a time of whenever they were getting their driver's license, or maybe they were watching a video like this that convinced them to become an organ donor. Whatever reason, they became an organ donor for selfless reasons, and you get to meet the families of these people, and you get to hear the stories of the people they saved. You know how inspiring that is. You
No,
know
I
what I
could
mean? Like,
imagine. I could
yeah,
imagine.
it's an incredible thing. And this is what I like to do is when I go to these events is talk about what I went through and talk about my experience. You know, and I also had a kidney transplant. You know, and my brother Dominic, both my brothers tried to become a donor for me. And my brother Dominic was the one who was able to be my donor. And
Wow.
you know, he sacrificed everything and donated his kidney to me.
Mm. Wow.
So yeah, and I share those stories as well, you know, with everyone. I think sharing successful organ transplant stories is so important because you know when I was presented with organ transplant, I was so fearful. I was scared. I was scared. I mean, I was scared. I didn't want to go through it. I just, you know, you always hear the worst of those things. You know,
Yeah.
then they say that statistics, 50%, all the statistics they were telling, 50% survive past 5 years. After that, it goes down every 10%, blah, blah, blah. You only have 2 years to live. Oh, when you're born, they said, when I was born, you're going to live till you're 12. Statistics, numbers. There's no statistics for someone's indomitable will to survive. You
Exactly.
know what I mean? There's no statistic for that. So they need to hear stories of positive things, positive outcomes, because it'll give them the strength to become or to go through that process of
Yeah.
getting listed for a transplant.
Yeah, and
So
it's in yeah, absolutely, I agree. And it's so interesting too, like when the statistics start to come out. Like I've experienced this too, obviously, you know my story, but the statistics of you're not going to live that long or it's going to be 50% and 60%, all these percentages. And really what it is they like to play God, you know, they like to play and they like to tell you when you're going to live and when you're going to die. But the only person that knows that is God. So it actually frustrates me a little bit.
of
This is
course,
something that I've dealt with. I get very frustrated when people and doctors or whoever tells me that, oh, so you're gonna have this percent of chance of living, or you're only gonna live to this day, or this. It's like I don't really, I've never been into that. Even when I didn't even understand what was going on, when they were
Mhm.
telling me when I was a young child, and you know they were telling my parents these things, I never really believed it. And I think that that's key. Like you can't
Oh,
once you put your mind into that space and start to believe this stuff that comes, it's it's not healthy, and it can lead you down some really, really dark rabbit holes.
Without a doubt, man, without a doubt. And I do want to say, I mean, it's not just about faith and how positive. It's also about modern science, and thank God for the science and the things that we've discovered
Yeah.
throughout the 90s and the 2000s, and now with Trikafta. You
Yeah.
know, listen, anyone born with CF, even in the 90s, we got to be grateful for what we have, the gifts that we have.
Always grateful. You have
Because
to
now,
be.
as you know, the CF life, you know, like as like now, I think it's like in the 50s, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredible. And hopefully it keeps going up and going up and going up. Hopefully we find a cure, you know.
Yeah. And I think that's common. I think that's common, James.
I hope so. I hope so. It's interesting they can give us a medication that takes all our symptoms away but can't find a cure. I've always thought about that, you know. It's very interesting to me. But I want to just backtrack a little bit earlier. I wrote something down, and because this is something that I've dealt with and a lot of CFers I speak with and just people in general. You know, when we have CF and we're really sick, like you were saying earlier, we're always kind of rushing, trying to get to our goals because we have only this. We're told we only have this amount of time to live. We're always kind of rushing and living in the future all the time. And I dealt with that for a very long time, and I had to heal myself and try to understand where that comes from. And I analyzed that it comes from cystic fibrosis, that rushing, that overthinking of everything. And can you just give your experience with that? Because you touched on a little bit in the beginning about how you kind of were just like always rushing into different things. Can you just touch on that and like maybe do you still do that?
I think no, absolutely, because you know, like part of the reason is what they've told us, what you read. You know, I mean, listen, the statistics are there because this is what happened. You know, we do have a shorter lifespan, so with that knowledge, you want to do everything you possibly can, and also life is just that much more important to you now. Like you want to literally like, you know, enjoy every day like it's your last. You kind of also because of what all the responsibilities we have with this disease, especially with someone that had to grow up with like nebulizer treatments all the time. My life was always revolved around a certain time period. Like I had to do everything. You know, I could do this around this time, and then by 3 o'clock I have to be home. I can't really go out. I can't go out late because I have to do a nebulizer treatment before I go to bed. You know, so and it gives you a certain maturity. So while all my friends in high school were going out partying and stuff, I was at home doing nebulizer treatments at certain times, and then it makes you like think a little bit more maturely. It gives you more responsibility, and with more when you're like at 10 years old and you're responsible for like making sure you take all your medicine, you're doing adult things already. So you're thinking like an adult. That kind of also like speeds up your mindset a little bit. So I felt like, and for some reason, I feel like I'm an old soul. Even when I was a kid, I always surrounded myself with older people. Like I loved more than anything hanging out with my grandparents, you know, and I'm blessed to still have my grandma, you know, like, so just being around the disease, I think it naturally makes you live life a little bit more and do things that maybe it would take a little, like someone who would go to college first. Like I probably would have went to college to be in the medical field because I love the medical field, but I just didn't think I had the time to do it. I didn't think I would be able to, you know? So I also wanted to be an actor, you know, grew up with movies like Casino and Goodfellas and The Godfather. I mean, this is like the world I loved, you know? So, and so that was like a very inspiring to me, those kind of actors growing up. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to pursue my career as an actor. I would never have done that. I wouldn't have had the balls to go to LA at 20 years old with nothing, basically, but the support of my family. I did have that. And I was very lucky to do that because of that. And I'm grateful for that. But I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't have this disease. I wouldn't have, my mindset wouldn't have been there.
Yes,
you know?
absolutely. I think that just from what you're explaining and all the support you have, I think God has had his hand on you your entire life. You know, the support that you have had in your life. And it seems like every time you were in a dark place, there was always a group of good people around you. Like a lot of people aren't able to just go out and fundraise, and people don't just support people and raise money for them when they're in a bad situation. You know, that's a gift that's very, very important. And
I acknowledge it. I know I'm lucky. And I tell social workers this, I tell people in the hospital field, if you guys ever have people that are going through this process that I went through, that are trying to about to get listed, whatever, I'm always open to having conversation with them, befriending them, talking with them. It's different when you hear the side of what transplant life is from a doctor or from a medical professional. But when you talk to people that have gone through it that understand it on a personal level. It's a much different experience. And there's so many people. I have had the fortune of befriending people and guiding people through this transplant experience. And I'll tell you the truth, many people don't have that support. You're right. And it's a big deal. That's a big deal.
Huge deal.
You need that support. You need that love. You know, one of the things I'm most proud of is starting a fantasy football league with my buddy Dominic, who was like my mentor through the transplant experience because he had gone through it right before me. And we started this fantasy football league with 12 CFers. 10 of them, if I'm not mistaken, 10 of them had double lung transplants at least once.
Wow.
So that's such a cool thing because, well, first of all, we try to just avoid a lot of CF talk. We talk about fantasy football, keeps our mind off of something different.
Sure.
I love that. However, we're in a WhatsApp group and we could all reach out and like ask each other questions. And instead of going to a doctor, we're going to each other and talking about our experiences with CF. Who's better than us to talk about that? You know,
yeah.
Doctors don't have that experience. Nurse practitioners don't. They have what they're trained experience, but they don't actually live with the disease. So I think that's important. You know, I think that's a blessing. So it's not always about family support. It's also about reaching out. Anybody can find support if you really want to find it.
Right.
You know, there's so many Facebook pages with CF people, you know, on it. And then, by the way, just ask your social worker. I don't really have anyone that's gone through this. I don't really know anyone. You know, I'm scared. You know, I don't understand what social worker will put you in contact with people. You know, social worker is a very key component to getting through this and helping you mentally. You know, through this problem.
Absolutely. So you touched a little bit on the fitness aspect of it, and I know that we relate on that part of things. And I think that fitness has saved my life in so many ways, and obviously saved yours. Now, obviously, in order to get into fitness, you know, there has to be a different mentality and a different strength. Do you think that, like, because I've asked this question to a lot of people that have been through a lot of things that are strong and I look up to, and I can, you know, see that they have been through something in order to create that strength. Now, do you think that, I'm just curious, do you think that we're born with this strength or we're forced into being mentally strong by going?
I think people with CF, I mean, of the people that I talk to, I'd say 90% of them have much more mental strength than the average person. You know, part of it is, it's, you know, who you're surrounding yourself with, but also what you're dealing with, you know. So even if you don't have that strong support, just dealing with CF gives you a certain incredible mental strength.
Absolutely.
You have mental strength to deal with what we go through.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's not an easy disease to deal with. There are always issues. And if you don't have mental strength in the beginning, you're going to get it if you by the time you're in your 20s and 30s.
Yes.
Especially, you know, dealing with this every day. And so some people just don't have the fortune to be involved in sport. They weren't guided to do it, you know, or they can't afford it. I mean, things are expensive, you know.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I encourage people to reach out to our foundation, to me, and we're happy to help people. You know, we've been doing this for 8 years. As long as we have money, we're going to help people. So I definitely encourage that. And I think that exercise in itself will give you mental strength. So even if you don't have mental strength, get in the gym, start seeing your body change little by little. I'm telling you, you're going to gain confidence in yourself, and you're going to gain confidence and a positive mentality just through exercise. I think that's the most important component of exercise.
Absolutely. I agree. So I have one more question for you, Nick, and then you can ask me anything. We can talk back and forth, whatever's on your mind. Now, obviously, the process of getting a lung transplant is pretty brutal. I've heard. I've been thankful enough I never had to do that part of CF. Now, how did you get mentally prepared for somebody to saw your chest open and break your ribs and replace your lung? Like, how do you have that conversation with yourself? Do you just say, whatever, I'm just going to do it, and whatever happens, happens? Or is there a conversation that you had with yourself before you knew you were going into that surgery and the unknown could have happened? You don't know if you're going to make it out or if you're going to live past. Like, what did you do? Like, what are some of the practices, or how do you get yourself mentally ready for that? Or is that even possible?
Yeah, no. So, you know, I believe to be mentally ready for a transplant, first of all, you have to be in a situation where you got nothing to lose. I mean, for me, I had nothing to lose, James.
Yeah.
I had only good to gain. Because at that point, I was a prisoner of my disease completely. I did not really. I was alive, but not living. You know, and what is the point of life if you're really not living?
Right.
You know? And so I had nothing to lose. So with that mentality, that being said, and the fact that I have an incredible amount of faith in God. I believe in the power of prayer. I had hundreds, maybe forget about hundreds, thousands of people praying for me.
Wow.
You know, like I said, my whole town in Sassano, Italy, this little tiny village, James, in Italy, southern Italy, where my family's from, they all came together. I'm talking first, it started with my cousin Michele, who's like a second cousin of mine, who approached me and said, Nick, we want to raise some money to help you out. And I said, Michele, I appreciate that. You don't have to do that, of course. No, we want to raise some money. Okay. He gets a group of kids together. They start talking about it. They get the priest involved, the town priest.
Wow.
Then they get the bishop involved. Now they get politicians involved. Then they get people that have more power and connections involved. Then they get the fire police, the policemen, the firemen,
Wow.
the banks. There was 12, or I think up to maybe 12 soccer teams. They did a soccer tournament in my name. This is all right before my transplant. Meanwhile, my family in Chicago is organizing a fundraiser in August. They picked a date of 10/17. That's the same date I got the call for my transplant.
Wow.
They picked that date in August. Then we have Dan, Dan Mayer, who's like a brother to me. He trains in Muay Thai. He's on the board of my nonprofit. He's doing a Kicks for Nick fundraiser at the gym. So you have all of these people doing so much help, they're really putting hours into raising money for you. And you see this, and that gives you hope, that gives you encouragement, gives you motivation. Now you're not just fighting for yourself, you're fighting for them.
Yeah.
And in that process, I started doing a documentary. It was called Fight Like a Boss. It's kind of why I came up with Breathe Like a Boss.
Yeah.
So we always said, we got to fight like a boss. We got to fight like a boss. That was kind of a boss mentality is what I always say. You got to have a boss mentality.
Yeah.
You got to surround yourself with positive things, faith, love, positivity, have that boss mentality that you can beat anything. And so I started this documentary called Fight Like a Boss. We're literally guerrilla filming everything.
I watched it.
That was very, very good for me because I felt like I had a purpose. Now I have a purpose in this whole process. That if I die, I'm leaving a message to everyone else that how important being an organ transplant, being an organ donor is.
Mm-hmm.
That was the whole thing. I didn't think this documentary was going to go anywhere. But eventually we got to the point of me getting my call on 10/17, the same day my family organized a fundraiser in August, picked that date. So while they were being over there, I had a film crew over there filming this fundraiser, and then filming me in my situation when we put that editing part together. And then we had the Sassano soccer tournament. What came about in this whole process was the incredible strength of community and love and support. And that motivated me in itself, So I didn't need much to be motivated. I had all these things going on. And a lot of it was inspired by me because of the documentary and stuff. But nonetheless, I am a man of gratitude. And that whole experience totally humbled me because I wasn't who I am now by any means.
Yeah.
I had a cocky attitude. I needed those things too because it made me survive this long. But it's been humbling. I became very empathetic towards other people suffering in this process. And then other nonprofits that helped me, like the Living Breath Foundation. I always bring them up. They were one of the nonprofits that helped me. They do a lot of physical help for people with, CF. And the friends I've made through this process, it's just been a gift. Everything's been a gift.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. That's it's incredible, the stories and the love that everybody came together for you. It's just Absolutely. It's incredible. You got, you're very, very lucky to have that.
I'm very lucky. I won the lottery with that.
Yeah, you did. And it was maybe in the purpose of saving your life, and it did save your life. And in an aspect, in a way, it saved your life,
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt. That's
saved
incredible.
me in different ways. It brought me closer to God and my spirituality, my faith.
Yeah.
And it saved me there because, I wasn't always in that direction,
Oh yeah. Same here. Yeah. I was always, sometimes there were some points I was running and hiding from God in my life. Mm. And I think we all have, go through that in a certain time, but, well, Nick, I appreciate you sharing all that stuff with me. I know sometimes it's a bit tough to share some of those vulnerable times. Do you have anything else you want to touch on before we go?
I think that, I just would encourage people to reach out if they need help through the Breathe Like a Boss Foundation, just through me as a mentor to others who need help, through people like you who are, by the way, you are incredibly inspiring as well. what you do and how you live your life with this disease is unbelievable. It blows my mind, brother.
I
I'm very
appreciate it.
proud of you. You know, I know that you really work hard at staying healthy, and
Oh yeah,
that's great.
I
People should look
appreciate
at
it.
that. Absolutely. So people like us that have gone through hard times and have figured it out in a certain extent, you know, I'm sure that there's going to be more hard times to come.
Yeah.
That's for sure. But nonetheless, you know, if you don't have that support and love it like I had, and I was fortunate enough to have, reach out to people because it's going to help you. You know,
Yeah.
if you even if just making a friend with someone that has gone through it, and also fitness is very important. I believe that. I think that's why. Well, that's why we started the Breathe Like a Boss Foundation, but not just for physical strength. It's also for your mental strength. You know, I believe it.
Absolutely.
The two components go together. And I also should say, if you're not an organ donor, please register to become an organ donor. There's a lot of rumors about being an organ donor that they won't try hard to save your life. That's all nonsense. There's other things you can donate. Like some people, I don't want to be an organ donor. My kidneys are no good. You can donate. There's 8 different people you could save through the gift of life. You know, and people donate their cornea, their tissue. I mean, there's so much you can do to help someone.
Right.
So I encourage everyone to become an organ donor if you're not, and you can go to www.organdonor.gov and register to be an organ donor through that. Or when you go to get your DMV, you can ask them to fill out that little circle that says be an organ donor. You'll have it on your ID, and you'll change other people's lives, man.
Wow, that's incredible. And how do people find you, Nick? Can you please tell us how we can find you if someone wants to reach out for help or wants to talk to you or anything like that? Please let us know how we can
Sure,
find you.
sure. Yeah, my Facebook, Instagram, Nick DeBrizzi Jr. So Nick NickDibrizzi Jr. That's on Instagram and Facebook. The Breathe Like a Boss Foundation is on Instagram at the Breathe Like a Boss Foundation, just like it's spelled here, Breathe Like a Boss Foundation, and as well as Facebook. Our website is www.breathelikeaboss.com. And there you can donate if you'd like to help our cause, our mission, or you can apply for a grant. Or you'll have my phone number. You can call me. We can talk. I'll guide you through it, whatever you need. We do help people in California and Illinois, by the way. That's
Gotcha.
the 2 places we are. We're a 501c3 registered since 2017.
Gotcha. And might I add that you play a very good Italian gangster. So if anybody wants to watch some of your acting, where can they watch that at?
Yeah, thank you, James. Yeah, I don't even like to talk about it sometimes, but yeah. So I was in Fargo season 4. You can see that on Hulu. There's quite a few shows on. There's a couple shows right now on Netflix you can see me on. So just search my name, Nick DeBrizzi Jr. I was in CSI New York, Mixology, iCarly. There's
Awesome.
different things, yeah. So you could just search my name through that. Nick DeBrizzi Jr. on IMDb. It'll have a list of the other things I was in.
Awesome.
I'm happy to say I just signed with a new agency in Chicago, DDO agency. So hopefully there's more to come.
Awesome, man. Well, I hope it goes well for you and we wish you the best. Thank you for being on. And please, everybody, like, subscribe, share this video with a friend or family. And thank you for being on. We'll see you all next week.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, guys.